Re-Zero, Volume 7, Chapter 3A, The Battle of the White Whale. With Duchess Krushkarsten at the head, the latest expedition to defeat the White Whale set forth. It was the first operation of its kind since the Great Expedition of 14 years prior, undertaken with the expectation of fierce combat few would ever see. The expeditionary force assembled for the campaign was under Krush's command, with Wilhelm van Astrea, member of the family of sword saints, appointed as captain. The troops serving under Wilhelm were divided into 15 platoons, with each headed by one of the old veterans who had attended Krush's address in the Great Hall. Each platoon was composed of 15 men, so the combined force under Krush's command numbered roughly 220. However, the total strength was not limited to that. A wagon train under Russell's command was apparently running ahead of them to the site of the decisive battle, the great Flugel tree, so they could begin transporting the supplies necessary for deployment. On top of that, 13 members of the Beastman mercenary group Iron Fangs, on loan from Anastasia, had joined under Ricardo's command. Ricardo was in overall command with 2 lieutenants reporting to him. And the lieutenants of the Iron Fangs were, "Hi, I'm Mimi. I'm hetero." With great energy, the 2 kitten-like beast people waved, then politely bowed. They had orange fur, and their heads didn't even reach up to Subaru's hips. They had adorable faces, and really, the snow-white robes covering them up to their necks suited them very well. So if Subaru was to put his thoughts bluntly, "They're so cute. I want to steal them for myself." "The Miss says that a lot, too." There you go saying that again, big sis." The girl calling herself Mimi laughed vibrantly at Subaru's thought, with the young boy calling himself hetero appearing oddly ruffled as he rebuked her. Based on how he addressed her, they were siblings, probably twins. They looked like a tomboyish older sister with a straight-laced, docile younger brother following in her wake. Subaru had no objection to the charm, but what mattered here wasn't appearance, but ability. They weren't heading off to a picnic. "So, it's not that I'm doubting you, but you're really lieutenants?" Mister, have you met Mimi somewhere before?" I can't remember, but it really feels like it." Mimi crossed her arms and cocked her head, but Subaru glossed it over with a strange smile. It couldn't be helped that she didn't remember him. To Subaru, the first time he met Mimi was during the events of the last go-around. Furthermore, it wasn't an occasion he wanted to remember. However, then and now, Mimi's bottomless cheer was completely unchanged. "Don't worry about it. My name's Subaru Natsuki. So are you 2 good?" "Okay, won't worry. And Mimi and Hetero are the best. If TB's with us, we're even stronger. Super bestus. Ka-ching." Yes, that's right. Big Sis and I will both work hard." The younger brother took the reins of his boastful older sister and somehow brought her under control. Watching the 2, Subaru had to wonder if that world had any older sisters besides ones making the younger siblings follow in their footsteps. "What's the matter, Subaru?" And Subaru, harboring that question, looked at Rem. She tilted her head with a questioning expression and made an adorable smile. At that point, Subaru cleared his throat, turning back to face Mimi as he said, "Well, that is an awful lot of confidence. Lieutenant's not something you can be unless you're hot stuff." "In place of the captain and Big Sis, I give orders out to everyone else." "Ah, I see. Tough job, huh?" Subaru imagined the older sister running alongside the belligerent giant, dashing across the battlefield with a hearty laugh. That would mean, lieutenant or not, Hetero was the only one actually performing the appropriate duties. The cute older sister was like an image of naive recklessness drawn by a child. "We will follow Lady Karusha's commands to the extent possible, but we have our own ways of fighting. I thought it best to inform you of this to minimize chaos, Mr. Notsky. Mr. Notsky? No, I'm impressed you're so sharp and serious. That attention to detail is comparable to Rem. He's just amazing. Now, you'll make Big Sis get carried away again. So cute. For some reason, Mimi was the one to puff her chest out in pride when she saw Subaru's frank assessment of Hetero. Hetero had a constrained look on his face from Mimi's reaction, only to slip in what he really thought at the end. Subaru added the drawback of overly spoiled big sisters to the list of high-spec misgivings he had about twins of that world. Hetero was in Rem's league on that point, too. Growing up with Mimi surely had no small amount of influence on Hetero. Having finished meeting the siblings, Subaru glanced at his cell phone to check the time. 12 hours remained until the white whale was scheduled to appear. They had about half the distance left to their destination, likely giving them about 5 hours after arrival into the decisive battle. Once we get to the great tree, we'll have to go over the operation one last time. It seems like having me run around is going to create a fair bit of chaos. This time, I'll be by your side, Subaru. I won't allow a repeat of what happened when we fought the Uragaram. Rem replied to Subaru's comment with quiet resolve burning in her eyes. I really am opposed to this. I believe using the scent of the witch to lure the white whale is too dangerous. And in the first place, the fact that the scent comes from you is... I'll use anything I can. If it adds 0.1% to the win rate, that's a bet I'll take. I come up short on so many levels. If I don't do even this, I'll never make up for it. You're amazing, Subaru. Even faced with Subaru's determination, this was the one thing Rem stubbornly refused to let go of. The way she seemed to pout as she turned her face away was a rare display of a flood of emotions, making Subaru's smile not so much strained as very, very soft. Subaru felt all too keenly the obvious cage in Rem's demeanor in the last half-day. Ever since the Demon Beast incident, he'd been convinced Rem had opened her heart to him, but it was only the previous day that their hearts had connected in a true sense. Perhaps Rem had sensed that where time had stopped, it had begun to move once more. Truly, it was so. And that was why I want to win this. Quietly, Subaru voiced that hope. At present, things had proceeded apace to a degree he couldn't even have imagined during prior go-arounds, where no one would listen to him no matter how much he pleaded. This time, he accepted his request. Relations with the cruise camp, destined for rupture, were good. Setting aside the exposure of all the embarrassing things inside him, it was no boast to say his relationship with Rem was now a far stronger bond. But on the other hand, it was a fact that things had developed in a way more perilous than ever before. Even in that moment, the menace of the white whale was seared into Subaru's mind, clear as day. Even Rem's might had proved completely unequal to the task against its huge, flying frame, able to send a dragon carriage flying in pieces with not even an attack, but a flick of its tail. Its open maw swallowed a land dragon and the ground under it whole. Its death cries, when those vile, millstone-like teeth ground its flesh, would never leave his ears. Just the thought that he was heading to face that thing made his limbs tremble, but he couldn't stop running forward. Yet, even as Subaru's mind backslid toward weakness, Rem, sitting beside him, peered at Subaru as if she could see straight into his mind. A weak, helpless Subaru Natsuki could not be permitted before Rem's eyes. Even I know that resolve doesn't make everything okay, but... Even if he stopped being a pessimist, that didn't mean his fortunes had improved dramatically. The route he was on held even greater danger ahead, yet he absolutely couldn't say preparations were ideal. All Subaru could do was what he thought best in the limited time available to him, calling on the girls and their allies for aid and leaving the rest that lay ahead to the power of others. That said, Krish and the others sought nothing further from Subaru, which was absolutely not because they were maltreating Subaru as a useless troublemaker. But when the time came, he'd do whatever he could with everything he had. Because the things Subaru could do occupied such a narrow range, he had to at least firmly grasp the range's breadth, thinking of what he could do within those limits. In other words, it's the same as usual, huh? Guess that goes without saying, though.
What's up, bro? That's a determined-looking face you've got there.
Abruptly, Ricardo, riding alongside the line of dragon carriages, observed Subaru, laughing as he spoke. Glaring back at the dog-headed beastman, Subaru firmly twisted the corners of his lips. That's right. Took long enough, but it's rock solid. I'm really something when I've set my mind, okay? Whatever happens, I'm not giving up on the future, even if it kills me.
That's a man's words there. The lady's gonna be real happy to hear that. Like I figured, you're just the friend the lady needs.
I don't think shaking her head away from the big stage is a bad thing either. But if I get along nicely with Anastasia, there's a troublesome guy there too. Remembering Anastasia made him remember the sight of a handsome man standing beside her as a package deal. Even his beating at the parade grounds at Julius's hand seemed like a long time ago. He'd experienced time on the level of weeks, even though it had only been 5 days or so, and actual time lapsed. Then, Subaru's words brought a huge, irrepressible smile over Ricardo's big mouth. From the reaction and the teasing look in his eyes, it seemed he'd heard all about Subaru's humiliation. Naturally, Subaru turned his face away in a visible sulk. If you're gonna laugh, laugh nice and hard. Even I can now appreciate just how little I read the mood back then.
Hey, wait up! It's not that I find it funny, it's something else. Well, you'll figure it out on your own, so dumping it all out here would just be rude.
Thus, self-convinced, Ricardo stroked his own mane as he cut the topic off. The suggested behavior tugged at Subaru, but even if you pressed the point, odds of a reply were slim. Incidentally, I've been meaning to ask you something since we set out.
What? Ask me anything. We're buds, bro. If it's not crazy stuff, I'll talk about whatever. And if it is, it depends on what nails I'm stepping on.
That part sounds like the Kararagi in you talking. I was just thinking, those huge doggish creatures you're riding, they're really something else. Subaru pointed below the enthused Ricardo's rump to the creature he was riding, unsure of how to best broach the subject. The beast mounts that Ricardo's iron fangs were riding were completely different creatures from land dragons. The closest comparison was a huge dog, but the huge frames of the carnivores rivaled that of lions and tigers from his original world, and their speed and endurance were in no way inferior to that of land dragons. Subaru's comment brought an understanding expression from Ricardo as he patted the beast mount on the back.
You don't see 'em much in these parts. These critters are called ligers. They're as precious in Kararagi as land dragons are over here. They're real territorial, so it's tough to raise 'em, which is why there ain't many in Lagunica or other countries.
Ligers. When he blinked and looked, Subaru thought he was seeing some kind of offshoot of the Uragarums he had a history with. Fortunately, there were no signs of horns on their heads, and compared with those demon beasts, their faces were clearly more adorable. If the demon beasts seemed more like wolves, he could say that the ligers definitely looked more like dogs. But having Ricardo, the dog-type beastman, riding on top of that super huge dog was a little... Somehow, it's a really weird feeling, like someone should paint this. Don't you feel awkward?
Sometimes people mention that, but not really. I mean, I'm a beast man, this is an animal, big difference between us. Now that you mention it, some guys might get ticked off if you say that. I don't mind, though.
Nah, I was wondering if I should say anything or not. Sorry, my bad.
Well, ain't that honest of you?
Baring his teeth as he laughed, Ricardo gave the back of the liger's neck a good rub. The liger made no reaction to its master's action, but the way it silently indulged its owner certainly made it look like a good, loyal dog. Even with the size difference, it apparently hadn't lost any of its canine virtues.
Ligers don't have the horsepower that land dragons do, but their agility's way up there. Just watch, a wild battle to send the whale packing is right up her alley.
Horsepower, huh? Guess you still measure animal power like that, even with dragons and dogs all over the place. Not that I've actually seen a horse. He'd heard straight from Amelia's mouth that they existed, but he hadn't actually seen one in that world yet. Apparently, their rate of use was fairly low. After that, Subaru pointed to the expeditionary force on the march behind them. So less horsepower is why you have teams of dogs for pulling each carriage? Why not just have land dragons haul the freight? Don't want the dogs to get tired before the main event.
Hey, we gotta move our own stuff ourselves. Besides, don't worry, any liger hauling freight is a liger properly trained for it. We don't spoil 'em, and no enemy swinging 'em off their feet, white whale or not.
With a gulp, Subaru somehow stopped his internal mental turmoil from coming out onto his face. On the other hand, Ricardo failed to notice Subaru's surprise as he spoke.
You never know what'll come across the road, like bandits or whatever. If you take too much time, and you'll be late. That's the worst outcome of all. So we've got to at least be able to carry stuff by ourselves.
No way there are any bandits who have the guts to attack a completely armed group like you guys. If they did, it wouldn't be brave. It'd be a death wish.
Got a point there.
Ricardo burst into laughter and, waving to Subaru, shifted away from the dragon carriage. He took up his post at the head of the beast mounts as the other people around them looked over at the loud conversation. It would seem that Master Ricardo is going around speaking like that to alleviate everyone's tension before the battle. Watching Ricardo go off into the distance, Subaru heard Rem's soft whisper into his ear. A bitter smile crossed Subaru's face as he realized, suddenly, that the big beast man was looking out for him. And here I was thinking I'd heard my resolve. Meaning, he still seemed awful green from his senior's perspective, even though the impending battle with the white whale was but the first hurdle with the others waiting ahead. Geez, you can say, set forth hero, but it sure is easier said than done. Subaru murmured very quietly so that Rem might not hear, but his cheeks formed a smile. The things he had to do and the things he wanted to do were one and the same, and he had someone at his back to urge him to do them. He supposed that made it all worth it. The morale was at its peak on the eve of the approaching battle. Now let's do this, Mr. Fate. Fortunately, the expeditionary force safely arrived at its destination without any undue trouble. As scheduled, they arrived 5 hours early. The gleaming moon had just begun to rise on the night of the decisive battle. The expeditionary force deployed, linked up with the vanguard, and proceeded to inspect arms and go over the operation one last time. Naturally, Subaru participated in the discussion, and when details of the operation were hammered out, how everyone would maneuver included, any time remaining for the fight was for free action. And as he spent his time until the operation with various thoughts running through his head, Subaru, it sure is huge. You seem happy, Subaru. Looking up to the point that his neck hurt, Subaru almost couldn't see the top of the tree because the trunk was so small. With how it jutted up from the earth, its great roots spreading all around its base, Subaru couldn't keep his honest feelings of excitement off his lips. Men are creatures impressed by big, strong stuff by nature. I was pretty impressed the first time I saw a land dragon, but Mother Nature ain't half bad. That Flugel guy did good work. As he touched the tree trunk, Subaru praised the work of the sage said to have planted the tree. Apparently, he was hot stuff, but no one knew what he'd done besides planting the tree. But even if that was his one great feat recorded in history, that wasn't a problem. The name Flugel was cool too. Gotta carve someone's name into the trunk though. We're not students on a field trip, so it's just, well, proper manners. Rem, lend me a carving knife. Even for you, Subaru, I will be upset if you do that, as shall others. Rem gently and properly chided Subaru for his burning, rebellious desire to have his name carved. Then, as Subaru pouted, she gave him a little smile and looked up at the great tree. This is where the white whale will come? Yeah, it'll come. When it's time, this media will ring. Subaru took the cell phone out of his pocket, fingering the strap to sway it left and right. The alarm had already been set to ring when the white whale was due to emerge. They were the same words he'd shared during the final meeting, and the explanation for Krush he'd racked his brains to come up with. He felt guilty in not divulging the truth, feeling like he had to make up for it by getting results. Of course, not exposing the truth to even Rem tugged at his heartstrings, but... So this media will alert us to the presence of a demon beast. That's right. Put bluntly, if it wasn't for this, my worth this time around would be right about... That's a lie, is it not? When Rem said that, with narrowed eyes, Subaru was sure his heart had stopped. Letting out a voice that did not even amount to a gasp, his heartbeats fleetly restarted. What had Rem said to him just then? I must have heard her wrong, Subaru vainly hoped, but the eyes with which Rem stared at him smashed that hope to pieces. She'd said it, and with conviction. What are you talking about? You know what they'd do to me if I was lying about something like... Resorting to Kararagi dialect does not suit you, Subaru. Fact is, even Krush and the others have accepted it, so it can't be a lie. Glossing things over wasn't working on Rem. Even so, Subaru tried to see the lie through, for if the truth was revealed, there was no mistaking that it would herald a worsening of the situation. If the lie was exposed, Subaru would no longer be consistent with the circumstances known to Krush and the others, for the only way to square those inconsistencies would be to explain return by death. Of course, so long as he obeyed the taboo set in place by the witch, he could not reveal return to death to anyone. All the more so because the pranks played by the witch's hands had finally progressed to crushing Amelia's heart. If he had to guess who the next casualty would be, it was clear that it might very well be Rem. He absolutely couldn't let Rem know the truth. And yet, Rem slowly shook her head at Subaru's excuses. Krush and the others merely decided that it was not necessary for you to lie. If you risked that, you'd make an enemy of not only Lady Krush, but Lady Anastasia and all the merchants in the guild, Master Russell included. That would be meaningless. It was an undeniable truth. Back at the negotiating table, Krush surely could have offered any number of rebuttals to Subaru. Russell and Anastasia, seasoned negotiators both, could have done likewise. He could only conclude that the fact they had closed their eyes to the inconsistencies and accepted negotiations regardless was not due to trust in Subaru, but a judgment based on circumstances. Subaru had arranged the place and the people for negotiations. There was no necessity to Subaru deceiving them. Of course, the calculation that they would think that way was one of the pieces of insurance Subaru had employed. But that was based on nothing more than pros and cons of success aligning atop the thinnest of ice. The type of lie Subaru was seeing through was based on a false initial impression, and it was the kind of lie that need never be exposed if it brought results. Ever. But it was different as far as Rem was concerned. Then, as ever, Rem stood as Subaru's ally. Subaru was deeply aware that Rem was now the closest person to him in the other world. To continue lying to Rem held a completely different meaning than maintaining the deception with Krush and the others. Making her accept it after she had realized it was false left an entirely different impression. Namely, that he didn't reveal the lie to Krush and the others because the pros and cons aligned that way, but he didn't reveal it to Rem because he didn't trust her. He couldn't help if it made her feel that way, for whether she did or not, he absolutely could not reveal the truth to her. Rem, it's fine, Subaru. Huh? Subaru planned to use words to somehow smooth things over and protect Rem, but Rem rejected that with a shake of the head, a thin smile coming over her lips. With Subaru too surprised to close his mouth, Rem turned a sincere look toward him and spoke. I understand you enough to know when you're lying, Subaru. I've been watching you a great deal after all. With a bashful, blushing smile, Rem teasingly tossed a finger to her lips. Then she moved the finger in Subaru's direction and continued. I also know you won't tell me the reason for the lie. But the fact that you won't speak to me about it does not bother me that much, you know? After all, I believe in you, Subaru. At the base of the great flugel tree, a breeze passed between the two as they faced each other. With Subaru stunned to silence, Rem gently put a hand to her breast and stated before him, Subaru, if you say that you know where the white whale shall appear, I believe you. If you say that the witch cult is after Lady Amelia and the others, I believe you. Even should you say the moon shall fall and destroy this nation, I shall believe you, Subaru. Well, I wouldn't go quite that far. Yes, I suppose not, but that's how serious I am. The smile vanished, and Rem stared at Subaru with very serious eyes. Then she silently lowered her hips, grasping the hem of her skirt with both hands as she curtsied. I adore you with all this body and all this heart, Subaru. Furthermore, now and in the future, I shall never, ever doubt you, Subaru. Therefore, it is not necessary whatsoever to push yourself into a corner to make me believe your lie. Subaru barely managed to choke back the heat welling up from his throat. He pressed down on the inner corners of his eyes, turned his face up, and opened his trembling mouth wide and exclaimed, Ah, man, staring at this huge tree really raises the tension. Yes, I suppose so. I won't be able to calm down unless I'm looking at this tree. There's no other reason at all, but I won't be able to look down for a little while. Yes, I suppose not. Subaru put on a show to keep his face turned up so that tears might not fall. It was a frail bluff on his part, but Rem, enveloped by gentle benevolence, did not call him on it. That moment, Subaru understood the true extent of his own idiocy all over again. If only he could have divulged everything to Rem from the very beginning. He couldn't have just told her everything, but if he could have at least conveyed to her the tragedy yet to come, Subaru would no doubt have been spared having the tragedy repeated a second and a third time. Subaru couldn't explain the reasons why, so he thought no one would believe him if he said anything. Thus, he decided to go it alone, lending to various failures over and over. But Rem was different. She wasn't asking for a reason. She'd believe Subaru, even if he didn't explain. Just like that moment, she forgave Subaru. in her gentle, affectionate way for not speaking the truth. This is when, instead of sorry, you say thank you, huh? Having desperately held back the tears, Subaru somehow managed to face Rem once more. Rem made a beaming smile and nodded at his reply. To be honest, I feel like I'll only be able to return super tiny little pieces of everything you've given to me, Rem. That is not so. Rem lowered her head slightly as she denied Subaru's words. I really do understand that speaking like this will only bring you suffering, Subaru. That is why I have spoken regardless in my own selfishness. I do not think of it like that at all. I'm the bad one for hiding stuff. But it really is selfish for me even so. I am sorry. The words were self-efficating, but when Rem lifted her face, her expression was sunny. Seeing Subaru happily falter from the inconsistent sight, Rem tilted her head. I thought it would be nice if you passed on to others a tiny bit of the load you carry. As I am now, that you would know when to do so makes me unbearably sad. In that moment, Rem conveyed a resolve, the firmness of her feelings. Subaru leaned against the trunk of the great tree and took a deep breath. I love Amelia. Yes. He revisited the words he had once exchanged with Rem. He knew that the words wounded her deeply, that they were words that made her suffer, yet Subaru spoke them once more. However, but when you're with me, my heart trembles. Go ahead. You probably think I'm a terrible guy now. He wondered if the word terrible even cut it. But they were Subaru's honest feelings. For even though he knew he could not answer Rem's hopes, only her words had warmed his heart so. Somehow, the breath Rem let out seemed hot as she said, Truly, you are a terrible person, Subaru. I know. That is a lie. I love you. I know that. Jeez. Subaru's face turned beet red as he stated plainly how she felt all over again. If it were not night, that redness would have surely stood out. Subaru turned his back, as if trying to conceal the red surface of his face, and began to walk away from the tree. Time to head back, he said. We need to get mind and body ready to ride up to when the white whale appears. Before he passed in front of Rem, he grasped her dangling right hand. When her hand was grasped, Rem raised her voice in a little, but immediately hurried to match Subaru's walking pace, staring at the side of the young man's face, one he did not wish her to see, with teasing eyes as she said, Subaru. What? I'm fine with being your second wife. They were words to make a man unwittingly halt in his tracks. When Subaru, unable to resist, looked toward her, Rem made a face like that of an adorable puppy, seemingly wagging her tail as she awaited Subaru's reply. Oh, good grief. Just how far is this girl gonna? If Amelia Tan's a very generous first wife. Well then, when we get back, you must convince Lady Amelia. I shall try hard as well. Rem clenched the hand not grasped into a fist, very animated as she spoke with a smile. Speaking jokingly like that broke all the tension, driving home to Subaru how weak he was. He truly couldn't hold a candle to the girl. No man could hold a candle to a woman, be it Amelia or Rem, in that kind of situation. Not that he really minded accepting the particular weakness, compared with the other ones he had known to date. With the approaching hour growing nigh, the area around the great tree grew taut with the tension particular to the field of battle. Having taken meals and sleep in shifts, the condition of the expeditionary force gathered in the battle zone was tip-top. The land dragons and ligers for the cavalry were breathing roughly through their noses, eagerly awaiting the signal. Everyone lowered their breaths and calmed their hearts, continuing to wait for the time to come. In the night sky of the Livis highway, a strong wind made the clouds flow quickly. As the clouds obstructed the moonlight, not a moment passed without gazes raised, checking to see it was not the white whale's giant body swimming in the sky above. That was how much vigilance ruled the hearts of all present. It is short time until the appointed hour. When Crush made that small murmur, Ferris, standing beside her, nodded briefly, glancing from the corner of his eye. In that moment, not even Ferris, having served Crush for so many years without ever losing that witty nuance, could voice a single jest. It was not that he'd been swallowed up by the strained tension. It was because Ferris knew his role, that of one of the expeditionary force's lifelines, and had wholly set his heart upon fulfilling that duty. It was more than likely true that Ferris's actions would alter the final number of victors surviving the battle. Crush believed that her force would emerge victorious, but she was not so conceited as to think that they would slay the white whale without sacrifices. Nonetheless, she held self-confidence that she could mitigate the number of casualties required. That self-confidence came from the trust she held in Ferris, her knight, so perhaps one could question if it ought to be called self-confidence. The sword-armed Wilhelm stood in front of her, on the very front line of the expeditionary force. With the 6 swords on the aged swordsman's belt, he wielded one in each hand, poised to rush out in an instant. The quiet antagonism wafting around the sword devil was in a polished realm, toned to a fine point as he faced the moment for which he had so yearned. Crush could not fail to be enveloped by an out-of-place sense of admiration at the sword devil's sheer purity, that a person could maintain a soul so pure, so unswerving. Crush thought from her heart that one day she too would arrive at that same realm. The faces of each brave warrior of the expeditionary force alongside Wilhelm had an expression of hardened resolve, their morale high. They obeyed Crush's command, but as they awaited the white whale, surely their hearts harbored doubts of their own, both about Subaru, the primary source of the information of the white whale's emergence, and the fact that they had far too little time to develop bonds of trust between them. And yet, they obeyed without a single contrary utterance, for they deeply valued Crush's judgment. Crush was strongly aware of her own duty to respond to the trust they placed in her. As the time limit approached, the brimming will to fight was reassuring, but inside, Crush was nervous. Crush touched the hilt of her treasured sword, ensuring by feel that the engraved crest of the lion was truly there. It was a habit from her youth, a little spell by which she poured resolve into herself. They had to win. She felt the presence of Ferris at her side and the legacy of the Lion King on her fingertips. However mighty the foe, it was all Crush needed to fight. And then... Abruptly, it rang across the Livis highway, assumed by the darkness of night. She was slow to realize that the series of light sounds making her eardrums tremble resembled music of some sort. When she turned her eyes toward the source of the sound, she saw Subaru putting his hand on the shining media. It was from the media in his hand that the music was noisily flowing. It was the signal Subaru had said would announce that the time had come.
All hands, on alert!
At Crush's shout, the expeditionary force poised as one. According to Subaru, the white whale would appear within tens of seconds after the media alerted him. If he was to be believed, it would not be strange for the white whale's giant body to be swimming in the sky that very moment. With the media having alerted him, the place had to be correct as well. She had plenty of room for doubts, but Subaru had given her no reason to doubt him. Crush set her misgivings and apprehensions aside, homing her nerves as she awaited the demon beast. Amid the silence, she felt no sign of the enormous demon beast appearing. The expression on her face was not disappointment, properly speaking, but after a minute had paused with no change on the field of battle, Crush could not help herself from being, for once, unnerved. Discrepancies in the information, mistaken assumptions, some kind of random accident. There was no change in the silence that had descended over the Liffus highway. There was no sight of the enemy in the landscape around her. As before, the moonlight was obstructed by clouds, causing a large, dark shadow to fall over the plains, but... Looking up, Crush instantly cursed her own shallowness. The moonlight vanished as a shadow fell over the plains. The altitude of the cloud intercepting the moonlight was gently descending, coming before their eyes. But a cloud it was not. 'Twas a demon beast, floating in the sky in the form of a gargantuan fish. As Crush sucked in her breath, virtually everyone in the expeditionary force came to the same understanding. Then, as if their minds were one, they tossed their gazes toward Crush. They were waiting for the command for a preemptive strike. They had succeeded in taking the initiative, catching the white whale at the moment of its appearance. All that remained was to launch a surprise attack as planned, seizing control of the front. Crush breathed in, as if to settle her heart upon the first command to unleash. The white whale had yet to notice the puny beings arrayed against it. The way the white whale was moving its enormous head was as if to check where it was, and it acted thus. Its guard was down, full of openings. That settled it for Crush. All hands! Full-scale attack! She went to command one. Nail it! Alhuma! A signal leaped ahead of Crush. Mana was simultaneously deployed by a magical incantation. The world made a sound as if it had frozen over, bringing forth enormous and incredibly dense pillars of ice. Each and every one of the icy pillars rivaled the center pillar of the mansion, with there being 4 in total. Launched at super high speed, the pillars raced through the sky and scored a direct hit on the white whale's torso. With a slight delay, the demon beast screamed and spurting blood poured down to earth. When Crush hurriedly looked, the land dragon Subaru and Rem were both riding was galloping, cutting across the vanguard. As Subaru clung to Rem's hips, he raised a fist, and Rem, having succeeded in her own duty by launching the preemptive magical attack, wore a very satisfied expression. How the two of them had jumped the gun, rather, cut the jump on the rest, rocked the expeditionary force. At the sight of them galloping forth, Crush could not keep her own mouth from twisting greatly. Not in anger, but in mirth. All hands! Follow that pair of fools! Crush's order erased the unrest as the various members of the expeditionary force began the offensive. Dust kicked up in the process, and on the other side, the white whale's cries grew loud once more, echoing across the night sky of the Liffus highway. After much waiting, the Battle of the White Whale had begun.